Coming up next on Hawaii's Best.
Hawaii has adopted us, and it's been really good. I think the early years, especially, you work so much, you forget why you're here. And anybody starting a business understands what that means. You might have moved here because you love the water, or you love this, or you love that, but guess what? You don't get any of that when you're starting a business to the level that we did.
Aloha. Welcome to Hawaii's Best. Here, you'll learn what to know before traveling as we discover Hawaiian culture, local businesses, and the experiences that make Hawaii one of the most incredible places in the world. And now, your host, Brian Murphy.
Today, we are taking it all the way back to January of 2020. And like I mentioned in last week's episode, I'm taking this month, July, off and working on some new episodes that I'm going to release for you, and just taking some time with family and kind of just regrouping, trying to enjoy the summer. So I wanted to reshare this episode with Garrett Marrero, the CEO and co-founder of the one and only Maui Brewing Company on the island of Maui. Chances are you probably have heard of Maui Brewing Company. They are pretty well known even off of the islands on the continental U.S. So I thought it'd be cool to reshare this episode. And as I was going back and listening to this conversation with Garrett, it just reminded me of what it was like visiting pre-COVID. We visited, my wife and I, for an anniversary in late 2019 when this interview happened, and it was cool. I went to go see him at the corporate office in Kihei. Beautiful facility. If you haven't been there, definitely would highly recommend it. Great food, obviously some great drinks. I remember sitting in the waiting room waiting for Garrett, and he took me up to his office, my wife and I, and really cool as we got going and talk story. It was just great hearing more about how Maui Brewing started and his heart for connecting back to Hawaii and also being an advocate within the community. Be sure to hit follow on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify so you'll get notified when the new episodes launch in August. I hope you're having a great summer, and I'm going to kick it back to myself a couple years ago as we learn more about Garrett and Maui Brewing Company. Recently, on a trip over to Maui, we got to spend some time with Garrett in Kihei at their main facility, and it was an incredible experience. And I can't wait for you to hear more about what is going on at Maui Brewing Company. So much more than their great product. They are actively involved in the state of Hawaii, and we get to hear more about his story personally and how Maui Brewing Company all came about. As I mentioned, Garrett is the co-founder of Maui Brewing Company, and you can simply find Maui Brewing Company by going to mauibrewingco.com, or on Instagram, follow them at Maui Brewing Co. Throughout our conversation, we talked a lot about some new products that Maui Brewing Company has coming out, and since the release of this episode, have come out with some of those things that we talked about in this interview. So to find out what those products are, or to find out what's happening next with Maui Brewing Company, just go to mauibrewingco.com and you can find out everything there. Garrett and I connected off air for some time as well when we were visiting with them. And it was just so evident and so cool to see the respect that his staff have for him as we're just walking around the facility. He's greeting everybody by first name. He knows who's having a baby. And it was just such a cool experience. You got this family feel for a company that has grown so large, so fast, that Garrett's intentionality and his care for his staff and his care to not only grow and make a larger impact, but to grow at a pace that is healthy and to grow at a pace that values their customer and as well as the staff on the same hand. And that is an interesting balance to find. And it's cool to see Garrett flourishing in that. So I'm just excited for you to listen to our conversation. So let's go ahead and head over and talk story with Garrett from Maui Brewing Company.
Let's talk story.
Garrett, thank you so much for coming on Hawaii's Best today. How are you doing? And maybe tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm doing pretty well. No shortage of things to do, of course. Here end of summer, beer drinking season still. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Maui Brewing Company. 2005 is when we started, and here we are almost be 15 years in January later, still cranking it out.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, how did it all start back in 05? I'm sure there's a story before 05.
Sure. I was 26 when we started the company, but it really was just a vision, a dream of mine that I had back in probably 2002, maybe 3.
Okay.
I'd been coming to Hawaii on vacation for several years and just fell in love with Maui and realized that there was no local beer that was actually being produced in Hawaii. And, most of it was being shipped over and called local. Me coming from San Diego saw that as a huge opportunity because, craft beer, that term craft beer was just starting to be used. Right. And I felt that it was about a sense of place, about integrity, and it really needed to be local if you were going to say it was local. So I saw that as a good opportunity. I was in finance. My girlfriend at the time was in finance, but on the analytical side. And one day I told her, hey, we should move to Maui and start a brewery. And that was in 2004. That was early 2004. And by December of 04, we had moved here and we co-founded Maui Brewing Company together.
Wow.
So opened the doors on January 28th, 2005, and been going ever since.
You had the idea in 04.
03.
03.
Yeah.
And you opened 2 years later.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. It was pretty quick. I mean, I was in finance. Like I said, I was an investment consultant and wanted to do something different. I was at the time thinking, 04, 03, I was 25, just turned 25, I think, when I really started thinking about this, and maybe even 24. That's so long ago. But, like any young man at that age, you can do no wrong. You're invincible. You're infallible. Make no mistakes, of course. I'm sure you're probably a lot like that, Brian, at least back then, maybe.
Right.
Of course, I've downplayed that over the years and learned how much I didn't know. I think the next step in a man's life is finding out everything you don't know. But, it was that youthful, maybe a bit of aggressiveness, but also that youthful confidence, I think, that helped to say, I can do that.
Right.
I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I can do it. And we took a big risk and sold everything we owned, borrowed every penny we could, and started up Maui Brewing Company from essentially a bankrupt brew pub that was operating in just outside of bankruptcy after coming out of receivership in Kahana.
Okay.
And so that was something that we saw as an opportunity because it had a brew house, had a restaurant. So there was already some traffic there. And if we cut out all those other partners and trimmed the fat, rebranded because it was not Maui Brewing Company, simplify things and really focus on making killer, authentic, local Hawaiian beer, then maybe we had a chance. And at the time, there were about 1,200 breweries in the country. So back then it was really very new. There was, of course, guys like Sierra Nevada, Ken Grossman and family, and Greg Cook and Steve Wagner over at Stone. They had been doing this for many years, even prior to maybe 2 decades prior. We just wanted to do that here in Hawaii.
Okay.
And it wasn't being done. I would say the way micro brewing was being done in Hawaii was, I think, with probably the least amount of integrity it could have been done, because it was being brewed in the mainland, shipped over and called local. And
labeled local.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Labeled, I'll just say it, Liquid Aloha.
Okay.
And there hasn't been a bottle of Kona Brewing Company beer brewed here since God knows, but before we started, say 20 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, we saw that as an opportunity to really lead with, hey, we're local, we're authentic. We weren't trying to appropriate the culture or appropriate the local name in terms of like that we're from here, but it was a place that we fell in love with and wanted to give back to that community by making a craft beer. I think beer brings people together. All alcohol does that. Liquid courage in some ways. I mean, I know relationships start because, people break down their barriers and are able to have a conversation when they've had a few drinks, and like Frank Zappa said, you need, to be a real country, you need an airline, a sports team, and a beer. And we wanted to give that to Hawaii, was our contribution, if you will.
So when you came on island during those vacation years to Maui specifically, you saw the opportunity, you saw the problem, and you're like, but where did this whole microbrewing passion, where did that stem from?
My grandpa, actually.
Okay.
So growing up, my stepdad's dad, we call him Opa, Bob. He worked at Scripps Oceanographic Institute in San Diego.
Oh, yeah.
And so he did purchasing for them. And so the captains of the boats that would come in and doing provisioning and stuff with him would always bring him beer from all around the world. And so he'd bring this beer home. And I'm thinking back to probably 13-ish, maybe. We grew up in a very European family. So wine and beer and, responsibility was always trained to us, etc. But grandpa would bring these beers home and we'd try them. And I remember drinking like MGD, which was my uncle's beer, and thinking that I will never drink beer in my life. This is the worst thing I've ever had. But then my grandpa gave me some beer and I was like, oh, this is good. I like this. What is that? And over the years, as I grew up, got to try more and more beers. And, Sierra Nevada is, of course, a core beer for me. I mean, that's a beer that I just love so much. It's still perfect to this day. Pete's Wicked, back in those days, Pete's Wicked winter beer was my mom's wedding beer at her second wedding.
Okay.
Stone Brewing Company in San Diego. They opened up in 96, the year I graduated high school. And my grandpa bought a keg of their IPA. It was one of the first ones they sold out of the brewery to the public for my graduation party. So I had this love of good beer early on, so much so that I was definitely a beer snob when I was in college.
Your palate was being,
I couldn't drink the Natty Lights and the Booty Chow. We called it was Meisterbrow and all kinds of other stuff that was, when you have to pool your money in for $60, you go get a half barrel. It's not going to be good beer. So I was always like, no, I'm going to go get a 6 or 12 pack of this or whatever and hide that and I'll drink that, But anyhow, fast forward when I fell out of love with what I was doing in finance, and I loved how dynamic that was. And I loved the pace, but I didn't love what I saw happening in the industry. And I didn't love that no matter how hard I worked, more and more of my cut essentially went to someone else. And I wanted to really step out on my own and do something for my life, for me. And this was kind of that thing where I could make it or lose it all, but at least it was on my shoulders.
Right.
And, I think starting out with the idea of just making local beer, great, authentic local Hawaiian beer. But then, these sustainability initiatives started to come into play and looking at the issues here in Hawaii from a cultural and workforce standpoint and, the cost of operation here and the Hawaii brand and how that was being diminished by all of this squatting essentially on the brands because they weren't actually from Hawaii.
Sure.
They really didn't offer anything back to the community. So we started just becoming more and more entrenched into not just being a brewery, but also being a supporter of Hawaii and supporter of the community. We wanted to lead by example in manufacturing and create jobs and create tax revenue. And like I said, of course, authenticity and then sustainability, like I said, as well, being a leader in manufacturing and doing that with sustainable resources. So, now just a couple of weeks ago, we've become grid independent where we produce 100% of our electricity on site through solar PV as well as battery and then biodiesel generators. We are still grid connected. So if we need to import, we can, but we're a for-profit business. We have to run.
Right.
But at the same time, our goal at some point in the not too distant future would be even like an island mode where we don't even have a grid connection. So It's a dream, but we'll see.
Grid independent?
Grid independence, the term we use, because we are technically still grid connected.
Sure.
Although we don't really pull from the grid.
As I'm looking around your amazing facility, when we talk about grid independent here, I think maybe if we can give someone who's listening to this right now, just kind of a scope of this facility and what's going on here.
Yeah. So, because the Kihei site for us is really unique. We call it kind of like the mothership here.
Yeah.
So this is our third location on Maui. We started in Kahana, which we still operate. It's a restaurant up there. We've been there since the beginning, January of 2005. It has a 7-barrel brew house over there that we don't brew in any longer. Then we moved to Lahaina for production brewing when we launched cans, and that started in 2007. We then since sold that to Kohola, which is a startup brewery here on island. And they've been around for about 3 years now, since 3 or 4 years. When we were building Kihei, we exited our old location. So we have 2 facilities on Maui, one being a restaurant and then the Kihei site. Kihei has the full production brewery, distillery, a joint venture coffee company called Origin Coffee Maui. And we also have now, we're going to be launching Hard Water, which is our hard seltzer, Maui hard seltzer. And we have Kupu Spirits, like I said, through the distillery, which is our canned cocktails, as well as our gin and whiskey. All of our offices and admin and that kind of stuff here. We are about 82,000 square feet in total. 60-ish of that is production space, and the rest is offices, restaurant, other areas. But the main area, largest consumption of area, is the production of all of our liquid, if you will. We have become a craft beverage company more so than just a craft brewery. That's always going to be our core, but we do other things as well. We have about 1.2 megawatts of solar here. So I showed you the picture. It's like the entire roof is covered with solar, as well as we have a bunch of awnings that we've built, whether they be solar carports or shade structures for operations outside, like loading docks and wastewater and other equipment storage. So those are all under solar awnings to create more roof space.
Anything you can
us.
throw a panel on.
Pretty much. Yeah. It's gotten to that point where where can we fit more? We look at the drone shots sometimes. We're like, can we get 9 more panels right there? And it's just something that has been, since the day the building was vertical here, we've been in constant construction on solar because we had to break it up in phases to be able to afford it, but also to maximize our tax credits, to use that financial strategy behind what we do here as well.
I'm sure probably from your perspective, you're always forward thinking, okay, what's next? Mm-hmm. But it's incredible to think the last 15 years, how much you guys have made an impact, positive impact in this area, but around the world, your brand and your product. If we go back to those early days, the 05, maybe 05 to 10, how was that first relationship like here on Maui?
It was pretty difficult in the beginning. The first 2 years, not so much, because it was just like we were 2 ships passing the night, just working like dogs at the restaurant. And it wasn't until we opened the production brewery where we could actually launch cans that we really had to have that kind of those harder conversations with people in the community. You loved the beer when they came in, guests, whether they be residents or visitors alike, loved coming to visit us and try our beers. But when you go into the distribution mode and you're now selling direct to another restaurant or a bar or hotel, you're competing against all these other brands, including those fake local brands, right? Your costs are higher, so your beer is more expensive, but so you have this huge education on why your beer is more expensive, from a quality perspective, maybe from a local perspective. You're also having to overcome certain, maybe more closed-minded people would think that, why would I sell your beer? Because you're a competing restaurant, as opposed to just realizing that it's beer. Okay. So we had a lot of that as well. Yeah. And then we decided to lead with cans. I mean, we were the 10th brewery in the country to put beer in cans, craft beer in cans. So here it was like only junk beer was in cans. And like, why would you put this beer in cans? A, B, why is it more expensive? It's in cans,
right?
All of those things. So we had to really educate not only the consumer, the craft beer drinker, but the account level buyers as well, and say, this is why it's in a can. Pour it in a glass, just like you wouldn't drink out of a bottle of wine. Pour it in the right glass. Here's why the can's better. It's sheltered from light. It has lower oxygen content typically than bottles. Of course, packaging equipment dependent. They're made locally. Cans are made over on Oahu, so you're supporting local manufacturing there, as well as a more sustainable resource versus glass, where cans are infinitely recyclable. So, we had this huge education before we could even sell beer, again, especially in cans. And it took a long time to overcome that. But now you're sitting 8,000 breweries in the country with at least 1,000 of them canning. Very different than it was when we started.
Interesting.
So it's a whole different world than it was 5 minutes ago. So, yeah.
And from your perspective, maybe more on a personal level, coming from vacationing on Maui to starting a business on Maui and becoming part of the culture. Hawaii's Best is all about someone who's coming to the islands for the first time, or maybe coming on vacation and they come year after year. But from your perspective on this side of it, what are some things that you've learned about Hawaiian culture?
I think one of the things I fell in love with about Maui in particular was that, you're treated how you treat others, and for what I realized too early on was that, if you're struggling carrying your cooler at the beach, someone's going to come help you and not expect anything in return. And they could give a damn whatever you do for a living. It's, I was living in San Francisco prior, And, first question out of someone's mouth is, what do you do? Where do you work? And then it's very quickly, you're, in a conversation about money and, what cars you drive. And it was status driven type things, where here it was just who you are. And you're going to be accepted and treated well if you treat others well and accept them. So I think if you come here as a transplant, if you will, and you think you own the island and you're behaving inappropriately or you're disrespectful, then you're going to be put in your place. And that's where I think some of these stories of people being not accepted or the local mentality or whatever, I think it's people who don't respect the culture and respect that they're guests here and that they're not bringing any positivity. That's what's going to make it a bad experience for you. I fell in love with it, and it's not that I wanted to, like I said, appropriate it for myself and change it. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be a part of it, and I wanted to support it and see that go forward. Especially coming from a city like San Francisco, which I still love San Francisco, but I love to visit, eat some great food, and then, get back to Maui or somewhere else. But it's fun people watching city. Hawaii has adopted us, and it's been really good. I think the early years, especially, you work so much, you forget why you're here. And anybody starting a business understands what that means. You might have moved here because you love the water, or you love this, or you love that, but guess what? You don't get any of that when you're starting a business to the level that we did. So, it took its toll, definitely. So, learning to find that again, though. So, and that's where, like, once we had more team members and we had, it wasn't just two of us trying to duke it out or, eke out a living. We grew from, I think, 23 on our team, something like that, to now we're close to 800 with the 4 restaurants that we have, 2 on Oahu, 2 here, plus the brewing operations. So as we were able to be more successful and hire the quality people we needed, that's when it started becoming like, we could go to the beach again and you can go diving again. And still a lot of those things didn't happen for many years because business was the priority. But, that's being an entrepreneur. If you're not willing to sacrifice everything, you might as well quit before you start. And that's the only way you're going to be successful.
How do you currently unplug?
Like literally right now, I'm flying a lot. Okay. It's been a dream of mine to get my pilot's license.
That's amazing.
Yeah. My dad he flew when he was young, and he always talked about it very, romantically. And he had stopped flying, I think, right around the time I was born, but I always heard the stories. And so when I had the opportunity to learn to fly, I just fell in love with it. And so I'm finishing up my pilot's license now. And to me, it's both it's an interesting thing because to fly, you really have to manage risk, right? You have to be thinking about, you're traveling in 3 dimensions. You're dealing with a lot of expensive equipment and, the fact that you're facing death by any moment. Yeah. It's very safe if you do it right. And one of the things that it requires is risk management, like I said, but that includes your mental state. And you have to have a clear head. So going up in the air and worrying about stuff and like getting on your phone and texting and all that, you don't have the time to do that, nor do you want to do that, because you're looking at this beautiful landscape. You're looking at the ocean. You might be, last whale season, I was flying over whale pods and doing my whale watching from the air instead of by boat. And it's a whole different perspective. So I clear my head by flying.
Because on so many levels, you have to be in the moment.
You got to be in the moment. Yeah. I mean, you can put it on autopilot and take a drink of water and, look at stuff, whatever. But you had, to be a good pilot, you need to be present, which means having a clear head, focusing on what you're doing.
A lot of parallels there, huh?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm finding that a lot more right now. Yeah. And, the other part of it too, is I lost my dad, about 7 years ago, almost now. And it's kind of a connection to him for me as well. So that I get to, when I'm up in the air, I can think about that, but it's happy,
like he's living his dream through
me. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
So, and I think beyond that, I've been the last couple of weeks tried to be at the beach as often as possible. So, and that reconnecting with the water is probably the most important soothing aspect for me. I always used to say that on, in, or near the water, I was always happier, and I'd missed that for a while. So trying to get back to those roots.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, if someone's coming to Maui for the first time, what are some, obviously they need to come here.
Sure. Absolutely.
But what are some other things they want to put on their list from your perspective?
honestly, like, I think skip all the obvious stuff. I mean, I think, you can go on the, 100 best things to do type sites, and those are fun. But I think really just being present is the most important. I see a lot of people come on vacation here, and then their last day, they're just spent. Like, they want to go home so they can get some rest, and they plan too much. So I would say first, plan to not have a plan, because most things here, with the exception of like luau's and things that you really do need to have a reservation for depending on time of year, just take it day by day and try not to cram it all in. Just plan to come back and see something else. I always recommend trying to stay like on the west side. If you're only here for a week, stay 3 or 4 days west side, spend the rest of the time south side. Do or don't do the road to Hana. It's beautiful, but it takes an entire day and you're tired the next day. But honestly, grab a 6-pack of Bikini Blonde Lager and a poke bowl from Tamura's or Foodland and go sit at the beach and just drink it all, eat it all, and get some sun. That's probably the number one thing. Just absolutely, rent a paddle
Give
board.
Give yourself permission.
Just let yourself decompress. That's one thing that Hawaii has over everywhere else. You go to the beach and you feel the energy just kind of relaxing a little bit. And, I go to the beach in San Diego when I'm home or whatever, and it's just a different feel.
It is,
The water's warm. You can sit out at Christmas and sit in 78-degree water, and then in the summer, like right now, that water's probably sitting somewhere around 80 degrees, maybe a little more. So you get in that water, you don't need a wetsuit to go diving. It's the most amazing place in the world to me. To each their own. You got to come experience it. So,
well, talking about being present and also thinking about what's next and vision, you mentioned a little bit ago about some new products that Maui Brewing is. I don't know if you guys are kind of testing out, or where you guys at with that?
Yeah, we realized years ago that we needed to be doing other beverages. And the reason being is you look at the craft beer market. Like I said, we started, there were less than 1,200 breweries in the country. There's now almost 8,000. I sit on the board of directors for the Brewers Association as well, so I'm pretty intimate with the knowledge. There's about 2.2 new breweries opening every day, and there are not 1 or 2 closing every day. So, the pie is getting sliced infinitesimally smaller every day. And, where we were seeing these rapid growth in other markets, we're still seeing growth at home because of this hyper local movement. And the reason I say hyper local is it used to be local if it was in the state, and then I remember being in California and someone saying, like, there was in San Francisco actually, and they're like, oh, well, we don't serve any beer from Southern California, because I asked if they had like Firestone Walker or whatever. And they're like, oh no, that's too far south. We only serve beer like north of whatever. And I'm like, it's not local anymore. Now it's by the neighborhood. Now it's literally hyper local is, your beer is brewed in Poway. Well, we're in Escondido. That's not local, man. It's that, it could be across the street, but it's a different neighborhood.
Interesting.
It's crazy how it's happened. So how much that's hurt us in the mainland, it was significant, but we've always sold very little in the mainland compared to what we sell in Hawaii. But it's helped us a ton here locally because of that hyper local movement. People are asking us for local beer, and we're the largest producer of local beer in the state of Hawaii. At the same time, like I said, beer consumption is declining over, if you look at the 21 and up, less people are drinking beer. Most 21-year-olds are actually switching to spirits right out of the gate, or premium wine, interestingly enough. So creating more opportunities to drink beer is important to us. But we realized that we can't make that change alone. So we started looking at other beverages that are being consumed, namely anything being produced in the mainland that is, that has traction here in Hawaii. So like hard water, hard seltzer, the distillery movement with the craft cocktails and craft distilling, ready to drink canned cocktails. If those are going to be shipped into Hawaii, why don't we repeat what we did with beer and make an authentic local version of that for our guests? So Maui Hard Seltzer will be launching later this year. We have 3 different flavors of hard water, 5%, gluten-free, under 100 calories, under 1 gram of carbs, no sugar added, checking all the boxes that what you call the better for you or BFY category is looking for right now. And let's be clear, alcohol is never going to be good for you. So that's why I take, not offense, but I take pause with the better for you argument, because beer is not bad for you, just anything in balance. But then on the distillery side, we have our locally produced gin using local flora and fauna to influence the style, hibiscus, lemongrass, oranges from my house in Kula. So it really makes a very unique gin. And then our whiskey as well is made from our malts, various malts that we make our beer with. So we figure if those are going to get shipped in, we might as well be a local option.
That's just smart. Yeah.
So,
especially with your branding already behind it. That's so integrous. Maui Brewing Company. When you branded that, was this in mind or you kind of a pivot?
No, it's not so much. It wasn't in mind when we said Maui Brewing Company and we're going to get into all these other things. It definitely fits. I mean, Maui made sense because we wanted to be very simple. We wanted to be clear of where we were and what we were doing. And since we had such a focus on local, we needed to have the geography mentioned in our name.
Right.
So Maui Brewing Company just made sense. So now that we have like Maui Hard Seltzer, Maui H2O, which is our drinking water that we're going to start canning to help eliminate plastic water bottles from the state. The Maui brand is, from a marketing perspective, actually more recognizable than even the name Hawaii. So for us, it makes sense to continue to build off that Maui brand. Right. The one deviation we had on that is the Kupu Spirits, because Maui Brewing doesn't necessarily make sense for a distillery.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to have a mouthful that was Maui Brewing and Spirits. So we decided to go with Kupu because the Kupu essentially means new growth or offshoot from an existing base. And that existing base is Maui Brewing Company that's giving and nurturing the kupu, the offshoot. Think of it like a fern, right? So you have that base and that new offshoot from the middle. That youthful kupu is protected and nurtured by the base as it continues to develop into its own. The Kupu Spirits logo is like an unfurling frond of a fern.
Love that.
It also has a touch point back to the Maui Brewing logo in the center of the honu. You see the swirl.
Right.
That swirl is called a koru, which is the Maori term for what kupu is. And so there's a touch point back to the Maui Brewing logo. And then, of course, on all the kupu branding, we say, brought to you by Maui Brewing Company.
Yeah.
So it's a touch point, although it allows it to be its own entity, its own thing. But, this is something that we started thinking about probably back in 2009, 2010, first started thinking about canned cocktails because we had the canning line. We were already making sodas. We were like, well, we could do this, but law didn't allow that didn't allow us to do that here. So we had to change yet again. I think I've written probably 10 or 12 bills in the state of Hawaii, but we created a new class of license called the Small Craft Producer License, which allows us to make any type of alcohol as long as we have the federal license to do so, which sounds very simple. It sounds obvious that we should have that freedom to make things and pay more taxes, but the state didn't have that initially because there was no one trying to do that.
Gotcha.
So we were that champion for the license and the ability to grow. And that's allowed us to now get into these other areas. We even make a cider as well. We do that under the Maui Brewing brand, but cider and beer typically are made by breweries nowadays, but going into the hard seltzer, the cocktails, and then canned water, etc. Those are brand extensions, if you will.
Right.
So
you guys do a root beer?
We do a root beer. Yeah, we actually award-winning root beer. Yes. So we have Maui Brewing Company Island Sodas is what we call it, and the Island Soda range is root beer. We've been making since 2008. And the reason we started doing that too is we always wanted to be a family establishment, and we were never a bar. And we wanted to have families come in, and I could see, a mom, dad, kids sitting at the bar, and, mom and dad might be drinking a cocktail or beers or whatever. And then the kids get their little pint of root beer and, get to sit there and have that beer with dad. And I thought that would be really cool. Plus my grandpa, Opa, loved root beer. I always remember him crushing dad's root beer at holidays. And so we made Island root beer. And then we expanded that into Island Cola, ginger beer, and tonic as well.
Okay.
And those last three that we added were designed to be great sodas on their own, so the non-alcoholic portion of what we do, but they were also meant to really play well with spirits and mix well.
Oh, okay.
So they stand up to spirits and they bring flavor to it. At the same time, they don't overpower those spirits either. So we really we spent about 2 years making the ginger beer to think about that. That's crazy. Especially since our batch of soda takes a day to make when beer takes 3 weeks, It's a little bit different, but those are what's in the Kupu cocktails, Kupu canned cocktails. So you get a gin and tonic. That's our tonic from Maui Brewing, as well as the gin from Kupu, and same with the whiskey ginger, whiskey cola.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Anything else as far as like, hey, this is what's coming next. This is what we're excited about.
I think the Beyond Beer program is probably the thing that I spend most of my time on right now, and things that I'm most excited about. I feel like I'm at the like right at the end of getting some of these things launched. We launched Kupu in July. I'll have hard water launched by the end of October, cans by the end of the year for that, ideally. Beginning of the year, I'd like to have the canned water rolling out to the schools as a pilot program, because I believe very strongly in minimizing the use of plastic in our environment, especially, the way it impacts the ocean and the environment, and just the sea life. And, people come to Hawaii because the oceans are so amazing, and they still are, but I think it's incumbent upon us to protect it as best we can. And I absolutely hate plastic water bottles. Like, I hate's a strong word, I know, and I try not to use that for people, but I have that for plastic. And I think the fact that aluminum is infinitely recyclable and produced right here in Hawaii through the can plant over at Ball, the fact that we have an opportunity at Maui Brewing Company to do something so good for the environment, that's something that I'm really passionate about. And that's what leads our sustainability initiatives. Just anecdotally, it's funny. I sent an email to Ball last week asking us, hey, there's all these stats like, if you put a water bottle end to end, you could wrap the world like 50,000 times or whatever it is. So it's how much is consumed in a year, or the pile of water bottles consumed in just one day you can see from space, all these different funny facts, right? But we wanted some that are more like different. And I said, the example I gave was that there's enough water bottles consumed every year to fill the Grand Canyon, like to really give it perspective. And I was like, I don't know that's the case. And I said, God, I hope it's not. And I got an email back being like, you're probably not too far off. And that scared me. The fact that here is this can manufacturer, and we're like, yeah, actually, you're probably not too far off.
Yeah.
Think about how big the Grand Canyon is.
Yeah.
And imagine filling that like a wastebasket with plastic water bottles.
Goodness.
That's scary. And you look at some of these footage of the ocean in the like Far East, you see these waves of plastic in Thailand or Bali and all these beautiful places. And the fact that we have even a small hand in trying to help combat that is something that I'm really passionate about moving forward.
And it's all of our responsibility. If you enjoy coming to Hawaii, Hawaii didn't become Hawaii just by neglect.
No.
Like it's all of our responsibilities. Like if we want our grandkids to enjoy these places, we need to leave it better than we found it. And we need to figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah. Just don't go to a big box store and buy 4 cases of water for your trip here.
Sure.
Bring one stainless steel or other reusable water bottle, and please use that on your trip. You may have the best of intentions and grab a bottle of water and, sit it down next to you at the beach and it's empty and it blows into the ocean. Well, maybe you can't get it. Okay. Well, now that's in the ocean for forever, so if you had that stainless steel water bottle sitting next to you, you just refill it constantly and it's not going to blow away. So little things like that make a huge difference. I mean, I always travel with reusable water bottles. I mean, I think this is my beer growler and it's never seen beer. I drink at least one of those a day of water, usually 2, and I try to always have more sustainable options. I have my travel water bottle that I take when I travel because it's slim and it fits in my backpack.
Yeah.
These are the types of very simple things that I wish more people would do. And finally, we're starting to see the movement swell and get to that point of inflection where I think it will hopefully take over, but we definitely need to be making that difference. So
isn't that incredible that sometimes you need people to get I get it now.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
It's almost like those old commercials. I don't think they do them anymore. The V8 ones, where you got to slap the guy on the head. That's kind of what needs to happen.
Yeah.
And, you start seeing pictures of whales dead on the beach and rotting and all that's in them is plastic, or the outline of a bird with the skeleton, see it on the beach and all it is plastic in there that they've just been eating because they don't know any better, So there's a lot of things that we'd like to do and continue to move in that direction. And that's part of our leadership in manufacturing in Hawaii.
Okay.
First was this grid independence project. Actually, I'd argue that's second. First was saying that, if you're producing something, if you want to say it's local, it should be there and made there because it has a direct impact on the community. Second to that was then sustainability and creating energy from renewable resources. You don't have to go as far as we did. You can buy renewable energy or you can do your part. That's all we can ask. We've been successful and we've been able to convince the bank to lend us the money to do that project because it does have a good ROI. You could have put that money elsewhere and we chose to put it into energy. That also gives us an accurate projection of energy costs moving forward in perpetuity. So our team that relies on us to pay their paychecks, they have a more solid foundation because now we're in control of energy costs as opposed to just fuel and oil going up and down, dictating what we pay for energy. We've seen prices for energy here go 30, 40% higher over the last, 15 years that we've been here. And they go up, they go down, they go up, they go down. They're all over the place. And more often than not, they're up than they are down. Those are the things that we try to combat and to make ourselves kind of lean and mean,
it's
if you
a
will.
huge win-win.
Yeah.
There. Yeah.
And that's where some of the financial mindset of both Melanie and myself, bringing to the company and applying that in a more direct way to the beer industry was very unique, especially at the time when we opened. In 2005, most breweries that were opening were two guys who made killer homebrew back at home. And they're like, hey, you think we could do this for work?
I got this kit off Amazon.
Yeah. And nothing wrong with that. Homebrewing is where all of the ideas and the crazy stuff, the innovation really came from initially, and still does to some degree these days. But we applied a business approach to something that, especially I loved in beer. And that's what I think helped us be successful as well. Ran it like a business, but definitely treated it more as a lifestyle,
Okay, probably a serious question.
Okay.
What's your current favorite drink?
Oh, favorite drink. That's hard. I'm not drinking right now. More just, I was on a cleanse and I'm getting ready to go to Korea, which is going to be pretty crazy. Normally Pilsner, Pauhana Pilsner from us. I love a Pilsner style, and I think it's super clean, nice and dry, hoppy. If I'm not drinking that, I'm probably going to drink like a old fashioned or something along those lines. I love a good whiskey cocktail.
Okay.
So.
Well, Garrett, thank you so much for coming on Hawaii's Best.
No worries.
How can people connect with Maui Brewing Company?
No one uses the internet anymore. So it's, I would say Instagram, it's at Maui Brewing Co. So for at Maui Brewing Company. And then also same on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And then of course, if you do still use the web, it's mauibrewing.com. And of course, if you just search Maui and beer online, it's going to come up with our links first. But we'd love to have you come visit and drink a beer, try a soda, get a cocktail. We try to deliver an authentic local experience, and certainly something you won't regret.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right.
Aloha.
Aloha. I just want to thank Garrett again and Maui Brewing Company for their hospitality, for showing my wife, Allie, and I around. And we talked a little bit about the root beer. Their root beer is amazing. So yeah, you go to Maui Brewing Company. Their food is great. Their vibe is great. Their products are amazing. So I just want to encourage you, next time you're on Maui, check them out at their main facility in Kihei. You can find them all across the island as well. Just simply go to mauibrewingco.com. My key takeaway from the conversation with Garrett was learning about how their facility is grid independent. Now that's cool on an environmental side, and I think it's easy to see the wins with that being fully grid independent. But what I really love too is that it's an incredible way to control costs. So on a business side, I really appreciate that. And then on the environmental side, it's just cool to see a win-win for both business and environment. I really hope that this interview gave you an inside look at Maui Brewing Company and added some value to your day. And if it did, again, hit that subscribe button, drop a rating review below, and I look forward to hanging out again next time on Hawaii's Best. Until then, be well. Aloha.
Mahalo for listening to this episode of Hawaii's Best. To stay up to date on future episodes, please subscribe and visit us at hawaiisbesttravel.com.